Good morning. First of all, I want to thank you all for coming, participating in this opportunity to provide a little more information regarding the police action shooting from April 5th, 2017, involving the Goshen Police Department. I also want to extend my thanks to the Indiana State Police, to the investigators of my office, to the Elkhart Police Department, the Goshen Police Department, the Elkhart County Sheriff's Department, and other investigative agencies that immediately stepped up to provide assistance and resources for purposes of continuing this investigation. As many of you are aware, our community friends and neighbors were severely traumatized by a very violent act that occurred on the southeast side of Goshen in the morning hours, approximately 9:20 a.m. on April 5th, 2017. At that time, approximately 3 individuals that we are aware of suffered an attempted carjacking at the hands of Michael Alcarez, 19 years old, of Bristol. Mr. Alcarez was armed with a shotgun, and he pointed it in the specific direction of each of these drivers of these vehicles as he tried to take their cars. As the events unfolded, numerous additional citizens were placed in danger. One young man was forced off the road in order to avoid a head-on collision with Mr. Alcarez, and several other motorists along Lincoln Way South, which is also US 33 in Goshen, down near Kircher Road, and all the way up almost to College Avenue, were also placed in the line of danger. The danger culminated in the parking lot of Double D's Hometown Bar and Grill, just about a quarter mile south of Goshen High School, there on Lincoln Way. At that time, Mr. Alcarez pulled into the parking lot of Double D's, immediately got out of his car, still armed with the shotgun, and ran behind the northern part of that building. Officers at that point couldn't see what he was doing, but as they saw him come back into view, he still had the shotgun in his hands. He leveled that shotgun at the Goshen Police Department officers, specifically Officer Scheidler and Brown, and he fired. At that point in time, Officer Scheidler and Officer Brown engaged him and did fire, they were forced to return fire, and they did neutralize Mr. Alcarez, finally stopping his attack. This had gone on over a period of several minutes. Numerous individuals were specifically in harm's way, and that is just not appropriate in our community. Now, law enforcement became aware of the threat to public safety when members of our community immediately called 911. And they started providing information not only of a description of Mr. Alcarez, but a description of his vehicle, one so much as to have the entire license plate of his vehicle. This helped law enforcement immensely because they were able to get to the right place at the right time and be able to intercept where Mr. Alcarez was. This occurred down in the southeast corner of Goshen in the Kircher Road and US 33 or Lincoln Way area. And it proceeded northbound on US 33 or Lincoln Way, almost to the area of Goshen High School where it ended at Double D's. How did we get here? I mean, that's really the question. We started with getting some information about potential carjackings and a man in the intersection with a gun. Then we received more information about this man is shooting at motorists. Then we received more information that he's around the area, going around the BP station there, trying to get in where another one of the victims had run inside for shelter. We gathered more information as the car is seen going to different locations down in that area. All the time, police officers from downtown Goshen are speeding down to where we are trying to intercept Mr. Alcarez. Many of these victims were able to get away. They were able to flee without physical harm. But the psychological harm that is still to this day present is something that we can't fail to recognize. Many other people who found themselves in that area found themselves touched by this kind of an event, thinking, can this really happen here? But it does. Within a few minutes, police were able to get down to that area, and Sergeant Stu Smith was southbound on Lincoln Way, US 33, when he observed the vehicle that Alcarez was in, namely a Dodge Durango, kind of a tan-colored Dodge Durango, make a U-turn in the middle of traffic and start proceeding northbound. As soon as Alcarez's vehicle came almost next to or opposite where Sergeant Smith's vehicle was, Sergeant Smith actually observed Alcarez point the barrel of the shotgun out the window at him and fire another round. At that point, he called out over the dispatch, shots fired, and gave out his position so that new officers could also start that way. As he followed him to Double D's, additional officers began the pursuit as well. Officer Todd Scheidler was in the area and was also able to catch up. He took over radio control while Sergeant Smith was able to prepare his weapon in the event that Mr. Alcarez caused any problems on the way. Mr. Alcarez actually slowed down on numerous occasions and stopped at one point, appearing as if to try to engage the officer, not knowing what his intentions were. Fortunately, Officer Smith knew that it was not a wise situation due to so many community members being in that area and their cars at that time, did not want to engage him there. However, when Alcarez arrived at the area of Double D's, that was when he jumped out of his vehicle, again armed with a shotgun, and disappeared from their view. Now, Cody Brown, another officer with Goshen Police Department, had been positioned further up Lincoln Way, anticipating that that would be the route that the suspect took. When he observed this happening, he got into the chase as well and was able to pull in directly beside Officer Scheidler so that their vehicles were able to actually capture what was going on their in-car video. When the shooting took place, Officer Brown and Officer Scheidler were the only two officers that were directly in the line of fire of Mr. Alcarez. However, also at that time, Officer Smith, anticipating and seeing the suspect run behind the north side of the building, also went around the other side trying to intercept him to keep him from going anywhere near that residential area. Again, this is only about a quarter mile south of Goshen High School. Officer Smith, when rounding the corner, observed an individual standing there in the open door of a vehicle. He was hearing the gunshots and knowing that his brothers, his police brothers, were on the other side of that gunshot. He fired 2 rounds at that point, and he did strike that individual. Immediately thereafter, it was discovered that that individual, Fernando Cuevas, was not the suspect. He was an innocent bystander, and he was there collecting bottles behind the Double D trash area, which he had permission from the owner to do so. Officer Smith, Officer Scheidler, Officer Brown immediately rendered aid to each of the individuals, called for an ambulance, and again, help was coming. As you are well aware, my office oftentimes will call for the assistance of a grand jury in order to not only figure out what facts happened, but what should we do in this situation. They provide excellent counsel, they provide a fresh perspective, and they enable us to make better decisions in the grand scheme of things. However, when we have a situation where facts are not in dispute, where it is very clear the progress of what occurred, and it is documented what was going on every step of the way, that's not always a necessary course of action to use the resources of a grand jury. I have made a decision in this case that I am not going to call a grand jury. I have also made the decision in this case that no criminal charges will be filed against any of the 3 officers. Both Officer Scheidler and Officer Brown were certainly justified in using force to neutralize Mr. Alcarez, as he was a profound threat to the public safety. Sergeant Smith, as he rounded the building, was believing in his mind, I'm going to engage the shooter and I have to stop him in order to protect my community. And he fired 2 shots, unfortunately striking a citizen, but also trying to work to protect us. Accordingly, under the laws of the state of Indiana, under the ethical rules that bind me as well, I am not going to file criminal charges for that circumstance either. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to make sure that we do not forget that it is a tragedy. Members of our community not only were injured, but one lost his life. I can't answer why. I absolutely cannot answer why. We know, based upon blood tests and autopsy, that Mr. Alcarez had been smoking marijuana prior to the event. We know, based upon execution of a search warrant at his residence, that he had been abusing inhalants. We know that he had a shotgun. We know that he was not working at the time. We know that there had been some changes in his behavior that one family member indicated was disturbing, but we don't know why. Other members of his family say he was fine, he was normal, there was no issue. We will never know what provoked it. What we do know is it is inexcusable. We cannot permit this kind of violence in our community, and we certainly cannot condone it. I am not suggesting by any stretch of the imagination that he deserved what he got. I am not. However, we certainly understand that it is the role of our police officers and our public safety officials to use the least means necessary to control a threat and protect our community. In this situation, it had to be deadly force, as that was exactly what Michael Alcaraz was doing at the time. In addition, I want to make sure you all understand that but for Officer Scheidler's behavior, but for Officer Brown's behavior, but for Sergeant Smith's behavior, Mr. Alcaraz was in an area, again, where there were numerous individuals of our community, our friends, our neighbors. And it's one of those situations where we are profoundly thankful for not only the training, the experience, and the courage that these officers demonstrated, but the professionalism of the Goshen Police Department in their immediate response, their objective response, protecting the scene, clearing the scene, and making sure that that investigation was thorough and complete. Goshen Police Department embraces the concept in their policies that they will use the least violent means, the least restrictive means, for purposes of engaging the community, trying to reach their objective, whether it's calming someone down who's clearly suffering from some type of an event, or making irrational decisions, or under the influence of intoxicants, whatever it may be. But there are times when they have to use deadly force. And that is why they're the ones that when they hear gunshots, they go to the gunshots, they go to the threat, they go to the violence, to utilize that training and experience to save us. They were ready, they were able, and they did stop Michael Alcaraz when they had to in order to protect you, your loved ones, and mine. And for that, we are profoundly thankful.